Imagined communities. What are they? Anderson defined national sentiment as an imagined community, as an attempt to redefine nationalism as a phenomenon. It argues that a nation is a socially constructed community, which means that it's imagined by people who perceive themselves as part of this group. It is a mental fact that gives a sense of belonging to the same nation through cultural mechanisms, such as language, printing, and the media. It is imagined because even the members of the smallest nation will never know the majority of their compatriots. They will not see or hear or even talk about them. Probably they will never know each other face to face, but in the mind of each of them lives the image of their communion. Nation. What is nation? The concept of nation appeared at the time when the Illustration and French Revolution had destroyed the image of God as a source of legitimacy. It's a political community that imagines itself as sovereign. It's the set of citizens who are under the same legal systems and same rights. It has two meanings: the cultural nation and political nation. The cultural nation can be broadly defined as a human community in which members have ties of identity to share, such as language, race, and culture. Political nation can be defined as an association of people united by principles such as freedom, equality, opportunity, justice, equity, solidarity, as well as interests such as economic and trade. What's nationalism? According to Ernest Wellner, who is a British philosopher and social anthropologist, he says nationalism is not the awakening of nations to self-consciousness. It invents nations where they do not exist. After that, Anderson suggests replacing invent for imagine and creation. It's the force that allows the construction of the state and the one that shapes the nation. This is usually an integrating strength that reinforces the self-esteem of a community. It's the commitment of integration between political community and the national identity. It aims to unite a group of people around ideas, such as the defense of a culture and a collective past, to search for political, economic, and cultural independence. Nonetheless, there are countries in which national mixtures are notable, populated by migrants of different origins and who have formed a diverse population that challenges the idea of a nation. In this way, from the relationship between nations, a competition for prestige arises so that each community considers itself the best and is willing to prove that pretension even by using violence. In fact, there are nationalisms that can be considered as a threat insofar as they are opposed to the identity of other groups. All in all, nationalism is a thought susceptible to interpretations and changes depending on the interests of people, but always has an objective, that is the construction of the state, and if it already exists, it seeks the assertion and the confirmation of a new ideal of a state.
But how did Anderson come to this? He started this idea by saying that the most arresting emblems of the modern culture of nationalism are the cenotaphs and the tombs of the unknown soldiers, which we know are both recent and related to religion. Since the very beginning, people have asked questions about the bad things that happened to them. Why is my mother sick? Why was I born blind? And so on. Religion has tried to explain those whys, but always silently. He also said that in Europe, during the century of enlightenment, it was needed a transformation of fatality into continuity, like when some religions talk about karma or the original sin, in order to give meaning to the contingency of being alive. To understand this idea better, he said that there are two relevant cultural systems that we need to understand. The first system is the religious community. He said that every great classical community conceived of themselves as cosmically central. like the Middle Kingdom, which we know, known as China, imagined itself as central through the medium of a sacred language linked to a super-terrestrial order of power. What's the difference between those classical communities and the communities of modern nations? Well, that the older ones had their confidence in their unique language, and it was the media in which the great global communities of the past were imagined. That means different communities that shared this language were conceived by themselves as one, and these social groups were centripetal and hierarchical. Thanks to the exploration of the non-European world, which was absolutely Christian by then, humanity widened the conception of possible form of human life, allowing people to plant the seeds of a territorialization of faith, which foreshadows the language of many nationalists. Thanks to the printer, the diversity of language was possible. Before the 16th century, 77% of the books were in Latin, but by the end of the century they were always in French. The other system to consider is the dynastic realm. In those times it was the only imaginable political system for people. Kingships organized everything around a high center. Its legitimacy derives from divinity and not from population, who are just subjects, not citizens. In older imaginings, where states were defined by centers, borders were indistinct, and sovereignties faded imperceptibly into another, and the way to expand these monarchical states was by sexual politics, not only by warfare. In 1649, the automatic legitimacy of sacred monarchy began to slowly decline in Europe, when Charles Stuart was beheaded in the first of the modern world revolutions, and the next year one of the most important states of Europe was ruled by a plebeian and not a king. By 1887, the civilized monarchies of Europe were ruled by the principle of succession by primogeniture, and by 1914 dynastic states made up the majority of the membership of the world political system. So, with the decreasing importance that religion had in communities and how the dynastic realms were almost ending, it was possible to now start thinking about the nation. This transformation was very important then for the birth of the imagined community of the nation. People now saw themselves as part of something, rather than just being objects of that something. Starting from thinking about the continuity of life after death and the feeling of belonging to a place, and therefore their people, these communities started to differ from the others, and a notion of uniqueness according to the place where you live began. That is why when we looked to a tomb of an unknown soldier who was a liberal or a Marxist, maybe our sense of the person changes according to their nationality.
After revising Anderson's work, we realized that the sense of being part of something gives people the feeling or sensation of belonging, and this sets in the brain parts that make us act like the others that we think that are similar to us. Depending on where we were born or where we live, we adapt ourselves to behave in a particular way that can be recognized sometimes easily as someone from a particular part of the world. As Chileans, we will act, think, and especially talk as someone who is from Chile. So the language and the location of a person are completely related.